The Bills discourse is kind of the same.
Great.
I know. I'm very self-conscious about it now. Yesterday, one of my first thoughts about the day was, all right, what can I do Bills-wise that isn't about who their wide receivers are or aren't? And then Elijah Moore did media.
Yeah, that was that.
So that was that.
Right.
And we talked about him and that whole thing again.
Right.
I was thinking about this, though. All the back and forth on whether they need more at receiver, is that really why they're not winning championships? What is it all worth? If it needs to be said, I guess maybe it doesn't, but the underlying question with all this offense versus defense, where you use draft capital, free agency, everything like that, is like, will the idea, what's the thesis here by the Bills? It's, okay, well, our defense needed more help. Nobody would really disagree with that. Let's just push in as hard as we can toward that. Multiple defensive tackles, multiple defensive backs, Joey Bosa, Michael Hoyt, Ogunjobi. Let's just, anything possible that we can do, we will do it. Will it work? The back and forth continues on, does Josh Allen need more weapons? Maybe. It's debatable. The defense argument isn't really like, did the defense need help? Because most people would have said yes. The question about that is it going to work? Is it worth it to pour that kind of effort and money into defense? Either way you want to go, you're still already this good. You're still already,
right.
AFC semifinalist. But that's really like it on the whole thing is, maybe they don't need more offensive talent. Maybe they do. But is the idea of pouring all that kind of investment into defense worth it? That's, I think, what the question is. And then, well, what does worth it mean? Does it mean winning the division again? Because that's maybe already there?
It's got to make a difference when you get to that moment in the fourth quarter of a game against the Chiefs, where presumably you need to stop them so you get the ball back and score, something that the Bills did manage to do these last 2 years in these playoff losses, but still couldn't get it done. It's part of the reason why I feel like, yes, of course, add to your defense. You need to get better. The depth-wise, starter-wise, impact-wise, you didn't have a legitimately great idea, if even a good idea, to start at corner opposite Benford. So, okay, I understand what you're doing. I just think there's a lot of overreacting to it. And I've made this point numerous times, not right after the Super Bowl, because after the Super Bowl, I was right there with everybody. Like, oh, see, it can be done. Look what that team did to the Chiefs that we can't seem to manage to do. And that's alluring. That's like, oh, I guess I should have thought of that. We already did probably 3 or 4 years earlier when they drafted defensive ends, with their first 2 picks in the draft after losing in the AFC title game there. And so we got to do what Philly did. The problem is Philly was drafting a couple of those guys are high picks that they got in trades that a team as good as them normally wouldn't have gotten their hands on. And, sure, there's their share of guys that just sort of showed up and had an impact and won reps in the Super Bowl and did a great job. They pounded KC in a way that, I don't need style points. I need to beat them. And I'm not losing to them by this huge margin, despite whatever inefficiencies I've got on defense, or worse, flat-out deficiencies, if you want to call them that. The gap has never been that big between me and the Chiefs. So, I don't know, this idea that I'm going to put a defense on the field that's suddenly going to be able to do what Philadelphia did to them, I think is really far-fetched. In one offseason, it's just not going to work. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be building towards something, but I just don't know that the thing about the receiver is it's not so much to have a guy to impact this year. I mean, that'd be great, but it wasn't realistic if you were drafting a guy on Friday or even Saturday in the draft, is to get something else in the pipeline, ideally something that could develop into a high-end guy while he's still on a rookie contract. So I don't have to pay the going market rate of $35 million if I want a number one receiver. I get him and I develop him, and then I decide if I want to pay him. And, let's see the case. But you don't even have the guy in the program, then, you hope that that's going to be Keon Coleman, who was a highly drafted guy last year, but it should not have prohibited you from doing more, in my opinion. So that's really the crux of it. It's not so much, I wanted a guy that was going to make them better right now. Because I don't know that I would maybe side with Bean on that. With the way he came across 2 weeks ago now, last week, Monday.
Last Monday.
That, you weren't going to unseat somebody, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't be trying at a higher rate than pick whatever that 7th-round guy was. 240, thank you.
Caden Prather.
So that's all there is.
I had to ask Sally yesterday his name.
Yeah.
What did we talk about in May 2 years ago about them? What did we talk about? Like right now, like I mentioned already today, I'm so self-conscious about the receiver stuff because we're doing it all the time, and I'm not even sure how relevant it is. Just how relevant is the receiver thing? We've had the argument. What did we talk about 2 years ago?
2 years ago,
Diggs himself?
Well, sure, because that is, we're coming up on that whenever mandatory minicamp is, that's, mid-May or something, maybe after the schedule, whatever, we get there, or that was June maybe, but still, it was him. He's here, he's not here, like that whole thing, that was around this time 2 years ago.
So that happened.
Maybe a little later than now, but still
That's right. Whenever it was, that happened, and we discussed, it was kind of heated, like, what did that all mean? Why is McDermott not so forthcoming about Diggs, and where's Diggs' head? And we're reading his tweets, right? And we're sort of trying to figure out everything he says. But that's just all sort of guessing and, back and forth on whether there's a problem or not. And then he shows up for training camp and gives his speech that everybody in the media gave him so much credit for because it was just like being honest and, how much he loved playing for the Bills and how much he loved Josh Allen and all of that. And then what could you do with it? That was kind of it. Like you couldn't sit here after that and be like, no, I don't believe him. So yeah, we did have him. But was there anything else? Like as far as the makeup of the Bills was, or as far as it went, what was it that we weren't like? What was the problem? Was there a problem? Was there an issue other than like his personality 2 years ago? Because when he was here, then we didn't look at wide receiver. What wide receiver was then was kind of what you said, but it was definitely, just sort of down the list. Draft somebody and maybe you can find a star, but it wasn't like that person was ever going to be like meaningful on the team, as a rookie. Mm-hmm. It was more just about the longer term, I guess. And what did you have? You had Emmanuel Sanders on the team and, veterans being brought in or brought back out of retirement even to fill those roles. That was the wide receiver thing, was how about somebody young that maybe can be his successor?
Exactly. And also on the lower end of that, even a potential Davis replacement. Because you were, by then you're already looking at the finish line there. At least I was. Sure, anything could have changed it, but even off of the incredible performance in the divisional round loss, at the end of the 21 season from Davis, I was not ready to commit a long-term thing to him. I always thought I'm going to need someone to be better than that, and that I don't want to pay what the market's going to bear for him. So there was always, that's you trace the credibility of wanting receivers. There's almost always a reason.
Yeah, we'll find one. Well, will the defense investment pay off? The Bills scored 30 points a game, a total of 525. I'm not saying that isn't good, by the way, by my tone there. I get in trouble for my tone. 525 points last year in 17 games. One of 32 teams in the Super Bowl era to reach 500 points in a season. Brandon Beane, in his interview with Tyler Dunn last week, mentioned how Carolina, when he was in Carolina, did that. They were 500 on the nose. In 16 games that year, they're also one of the 32 teams to do it. The 2020 Bills did it. and you have teams more recently, Baltimore twice, that have hit 500 points. What do their defense rank? Kind of teens last year. If they're right, like they picked the right guys with the right approach in this draft, and they sort of just like everything Bean wanted out of this draft, he got. And when it comes to wide receiver, he's like, we didn't need that. We got Josh Palmer, so we didn't need that, which that's going to go down in the annals, I think, if Palmer doesn't, become a different player than he's been in the league. But anyway, like if they are able to elevate the defense like significantly, you've got the possibility of just like an all-time great team. Because what Allen affords you is that, offensively, that potential. And, again, I'm saying if he's right. We didn't need Luther Burden. We didn't need whoever the top free agent would have been. Like, there really wasn't a great name for that. Mm-hmm. And, they show up this season, and TJ Sanders is a prodigy, and Maxwell Hairston is ready to start, like, right away. And he doesn't have that hard of a job because they're getting pressure up the middle and on the edge, and just everything's perfect.
Landon Jackson.
Yeah, just like if everything sort of happens.
Hits the beach.
For them.
Right.
I mean, this is sometimes true, but not always with a team. If you don't have as high a ceiling as they do, if they get it right in this one, if Bean is right on this one, they'll be incredible. And I talked about yesterday how with the schedule, my focus on the schedule is those big home games. But, Warren Sharp had a thing where like they play the fifth easiest schedule in the league. The 6 games in the division, the Browns, the NFC South, like that's 11 games out of 17 that, like the best team in there from last year is Tampa. So take Tampa out if you want because they were in the playoffs. That's 10 games against teams that were not in the playoffs. So,
Yeah, you can get intimidated looking at the caliber of the marquee opponents, but the rest of it is, you should be able to, even if you really have a tough time with those top teams, you still should be able to get it done.
And those are all home games.
Right.
Last year they went to Baltimore. They went to Houston. This year, again, they go to Houston. But I think if that were week 1, the Bills would be favored in that game in Houston.
I do too.
Who would they not? The other big games are home games. Who would they not be favored against in week 1? Is there a team that they wouldn't be favored against? I don't think so. If they went to Pittsburgh or Cleveland, no. If they go to Houston, I think no.
All right. You have to eliminate Philadelphia because
Philadelphia's here. Oh, well, that's right.
They can't come
What's
here.
What's the spread if they were at the Bills week 1? Eagles are favored?
Yeah, I think
okay.
2 maybe.
That's probably right. I think I agree with that. But you're right. That can't be the game.
Right. So that's eliminated. The rest of it, you would at home. I think both Baltimore and Kansas City are games you would, if it were week 1, I think you'd be favored in.
Maybe not the Ravens.
You think?
Maybe not. Close.
Having beaten them in the playoffs like they did and lost to Kansas City, I feel like Kansas City might be the tighter one, but that doesn't have to be right.
Well, the difference, as I see it, the Bills have beaten the Chiefs 4 years in a row in the regular season, and last year at home, I don't know. I think they would be a small favorite. The Ravens were favored in the playoff game, and I think most people's takeaway from the playoff game would be that the Bills were lucky to beat Baltimore. 3 turnovers to none. Mm-hmm. Didn't force a punt. Andrews drop. Andrews fumble. Not to double count that. They might be favored here. Is there any chance we'll get that game? Could that be week 1?
I wouldn't rule out Sunday night week 1. That game. I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, you're talking about the last 2 MVPs.
Yep.
You're talking about a playoff rematch, but it's not like the gaudiest one because it's not from the championship game, but it's still pretty tasty.
Not only the last 2 MVPs, but they both finished second each of the last 2 years.
Okay.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Allen was second to Jackson and vice versa.
Right. That is right.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So, I wouldn't rule that out. It's one of those games that, if we were discussing this in a different context, you might say it's too good for week 1, but I wouldn't want to rule it out.
Well, that's cool. That would be amazing. I've liked that game at New England for week 1. thinking about whether Diggs would play. But we won't know for a while. I'm ready for
how's your
the
schedule,
quote dribs and drabs.
How's your schedule sheet doing?
I had a thought today to do another one. Maybe I will. This is the last one I've done, and I don't think it's perfect.
There's a lot more writing on there than there was when I was last here, and I was only gone. I only missed 2 shows.
So much writing.
I only missed Friday and Monday, and I'm back already. And there's a lot of words there.
I still haven't decided where to put the bye week. But you do have the 4. Sal and I talked about this yesterday. The 4 marquee home games: Ravens, Bengals, Chiefs, Eagles. I kind of think will end up being spread out on the schedule. Like on this one, the stars indicate those 4 games. Okay. Also, the names of the teams do. But because
I like how you did that,
they're all so big that putting them within 2 weeks together or something like that seems, I don't know, like the networks might want to, showcase those games. Maybe the Bengals one isn't as big as I'm making it out to be. To me, it's on the same tier.
I think it should be. Yeah,
because the playoff game, Hamlin and Cincinnati. Cincinnati's a team that the Bills haven't figured out yet. Say what you want about whether Baltimore was unlucky to lose here. They did lose, and they lost the other time in the playoffs here. So, well, that's next Wednesday.
Yeah.